sonicstate.com.
Welcome back to the top 20 synthesizers of all time ever. Let's start this time by dispelling some common myths about synthesizers. Myth 1. Synthesizers were invented by Kraftwerk. Contrary to popular belief, synthesizers were actually invented over 100 years ago by this man, Elisha Gray. Myth 2. A synthesizer is just a piano that you plug in. All right, it might look like a piano, but this is only to give it the look of a familiar instrument. Many synthesizers have knobs, some have a fingerboard like the Persephone, and some you don't even need to touch, like the notorious theremin. Here's the Oberheim OB-8.
Oberheim really started in about 1970 in Oakland, California, and Tom was basically making kind of peripheral devices for synths and stuff as a kind of way of extracting other tones from, say, things like mini moogs and stuff like that. He built an add-on device called a SEM, which was a synthesizer expander module, and this became the kind of backbone of the 2, 4 and 8 voice instruments which later came along, and they were massive beasts, the big white face things. Beautiful sounding but very unwieldy, quite difficult to tame. In effect, each expander module was a synth in its own right, so in effect you programmed one for one voice, another for another voice, and so on. So you can imagine trying to tune something like this, particularly in a live performance. Kind of last in a trilogy. You had the OBX, the OBX-A, and then the OB-8. And the OB-8 was really used because it had much more modulation routing. It was basically 8 synths in one. Every time you played a note, it would cycle through each of the synths. Prince used it a lot with 1999 and Eddie Van Halen with Jump. So it's got that kind of big, brassy kind of sound, but it's also very, it can be very mellow and also really aggressive. It was really one of the kind of seminal LA glossy sound synths, as it were, and immensely powerful.
You're watching sonicstate.com. Myth 3. You have to be an emotionless robot to play a synthesizer. Most people think of electronic musicians as miserable old fools. But what about Chris Lowe? What about Jean-Michel Jarre? What about the bloke from Sparks? Think again. Into the top 10. At 10, here's the ARP 2600.
I think of a film like Close Encounters, where they use the ARP 2600, and at that point, the ARP 2600 was the kind of most high-tech bit of music equipment on the planet, and that's why it kind of got used, as this kind of communication with aliens. We've got this, our musical instruments have kind of kept pace with some advanced alien technology.
The 2600 just seems so flexible. You could just patch anything into anything, and I like the layout of the front panel of it. I like the fact that it was a consistent layout. Everything was pretty well thought out, where the locations of the oscillators and the location of the filter and amplifier, ring modulator, and such. It makes sense to me. The output channels on the side, and you can control your reverb and levels and everything all in nice logical place. The Moog Model 15, which was also a modular analog, was sort of a mishmash. You know, everything's sort of wherever the guy who put it together seemed to want to put it, and it was a lot harder to understand. The Odyssey is cool too, but it just seemed limited. You know, compared to, you know, when you're put in a room and you get this 2600 versus an Odyssey. I mean, I kind of understood how to make sounds, and you couldn't do the crazy stuff that you could as easily. The 2600 is a big beast. Then there's the Odyssey. Then the next one down would be either the Axe, or there's also there's another one called the Solus. That was a pretty popular device, but it didn't hit the market until the very end of the ARP company's life. The 2600 is great for bass lines and leads and that sort of thing. You can also plug a guitar into it like you can with most of the other ARP synthesizers to get the Pete Townsend, you know, Who Are You type of effect, and or whatever else you want to do with it. You know, it's a pretty cool synth.
Hi there. I don't know where I am, but you're watching sonicstate.com. Now, if I were to come up to you at a party, for instance, and say, "Hello, I've got a virus. I'd like to pass it on to you," you'd probably have me down as some kind of disease-ridden maniac. But not in the world of electronic music, because the virus is the next synthesizer on our countdown. So if someone does offer you a virus at a party, just ask to see the hardware up front, eh?
I'm totally in love with the virus. Actually, what I do is I don't have the hardware version, I have the TDM version, which I use in my Pro Tools system. If you want to make serious electronic music, I think it's one of the best synths on the market. And what I like is the combination in pop music, like very slick, smart synthesizer arpeggiators in the background or analog pads. That's what I use it for the most.
I've got the Virus C, the desktop version. It's 32 voice, 16-part multi-timbral, 2 filters, 3 LFOs, 256 presets. I use the presets a lot without editing them. And they're so good and they sit in the mix nicely. But when it comes to editing the sounds, the Virus is so well laid out that it makes it really, really easy. It's got a deep, rich, warm, sort of wonderful analog sounding leads and 303s and 101s. The drum sounds are fantastic. And the presets cover a lot of the lo-fi sort of sounds like stylophones and Casios and a lot of FM sounding patches. And once you start editing those, you get some really, really good effects. I was working on a Doctor Who audio project. I just didn't feel the need to use anything else apart from the Virus. And this is effects as well as music. It covers the whole dynamic range of sounds really convincingly and very wonderfully. I think I can say it's the best synth I've ever used. It's fantastic.
So here's the countdown. At 20, it's the ARP Selena. At 19, the Roland SH-101. At 18, the VCS-3. At number 17, the Nord Lead. At 16, it's the EMU Proteus. At 15, the Roland Jupiter 8. At number 14, the Yamaha CS-80. In at 13, the Mellotron. At 12, the Juno 60. At number 11, it's the Oberheim OB-8. Into the top 10, at 10, the ARP 2600. At 9, it's the virus. That's that for now. Join us next time on the top 20 greatest synths of all time, ever.
There's all the major musicians. Everybody who is anybody wanted to get them to play both live and in the studios.
They're pretty reliable. We might yet build a more modern version of that.
I hated it because it didn't have any knobs on it and it was brown.
sonicstate.com